Not changed.
Are we missing anybody?
Yeah.
Okay, we're
Oh,
still
no,
missing
she's here.
folks.
She's here.
We're really happy to have you here. And today we're going to be dealing with the role of women in Raza Unida and the accomplishments. I often get asked, what did Raza Unida accomplish? What was the role of women? And what did women accomplish? And unfortunately, since the very beginning of the telling of the history of Raza Unida, the books that were written mainly by males really discarded any of the women's roles in Raza Unida. So much so that I remember Nacho Garcia, his book, had us all listed as footnotes. Now we're beginning to see some of the women writers that are many more now that are talking about this. But we thought that it would be interesting to look at the different perspectives. And you've got some women that were really involved and were doing things in their communities. So what I'd like to do is have each of you first just tell who you are, where you're from, and what your role is, and then we'll come back and do accomplishments. Does that work for y'all?
Yeah.
Okay, and let me just say about my sons, their birthday's tomorrow. And those of you that are here are invited to Jaime's place on the 22nd. We have the birthday party we used to do every year. We haven't done it because of COVID, but Jaime's place is an open place. So you're more than welcome to join us that evening on the 22nd. Okay, we'll start with Juanita.
My name is Juanita Bustamante, and I'm from Asherton, Texas. We call it Cheto in the Winter Garden area. And I work with Mayo, with chairman of Mayo, Alberto Loera. What was I going to say? That's my son. And we worked at the print shop I was typing everything at the print shop for Mario, and Loera was there, some other people that I can't remember their names. But I worked there, and then we moved to Flores, where that's where Magazine was also there on the Flores address. And then we started Raza Unida Party. And we worked all over the place. And then we finally, one of the things that Maya was going to do after the Raza Unida Party was form Centros, community centers. That was when all the paperwork was started with all the federal programs, and the people didn't know what to do about it and to get the benefits. So we started, I had sent me to California for training, and we came back. I came back and we started planning the Centros in Laredo, and it's still going. I'm glad to say.
That's great.
Doing immigration and filling out all the paperwork for people that they come in for. And I live here in San Antonio. I've been living here since then, and I taught
Is one of you Samantha?
I taught in the West Side. I'm bilingual teacher.
I was going to come and ask Maria, and she knew who you were.
And I taught for
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. And I
20 years.
the Zoom to study.
30 years? I taught for 30 years in the West Side of San Antonio, and with Edgewood, and then most of the time at Crockett Elementary School. And then I retired from that.
I'm Linda Del Toro. I'm originally from Eagle Pass, Texas. I went to UT Austin to go to school in 1971, and that's where I started getting involved in the Chicano movement. At UT, I've just absorbed everything like a sponge. took all the ethnic studies. I became Mayo secretary, vice president, and president of Mayo. I was in the student and faculty Mexican American Studies Center. I was in minority recruitment. Back in 1974, I was Mayo chairman. I organized Ramsey's there was the first time we had Semana de la Raza on campus, and we had Ramsey there. And we were going to Amazo's high school, Anderson High School, to Xerox t-shirts to sell on campus. And one of the other things we did, we utilized all students that wanted to. We were registering students specifically also in the East Austin area. The other thing in organizing, well, let me backtrack. In 1972, I also worked on putting the party on the ballot. We were going street by street, specifically in East Austin, to register people and to get signatures to put the party on the ballot. Also, during that time, a little prior to that, we were boycotting the lettuce and the grapes for the Texas and United Farm Workers, and we also work closely with the Texas farm workers. I have to credit my late husband, Ruben, for helping me get involved and understanding the strategies on how to do things. Because in expanding Raza Unida, we were also expanding to tailor, to organize. And I'll say, I was just one of the foot soldiers. I wasn't the organizer. And that I give credit to Ruben Ventura, which is my husband, not my husband at that time, and Rudy Sines, who was originally from Taylor. We worked the whole central Texas area, which was Lockhart, Kyle, and I believe we might have had some candidates during that time. So I used basically, and like I said, I was always a sponge to acquire information that helped me kind of analyze how to do things. From there I expanded. I became later on Travis County chairman, which I held the election. And I was also in the state executive committee, which I helped Montana when we traveled to the state executive meetings and helped train other county chairmen to do their elections. So as you can see, I was a little bit involved. But, you know, I just gravitated to the word because I think Raza Unida was one of the points that I saw that really gave women the opportunity. If you wanted to learn and work, there it was. And like when I ran for my chairman, I just won, period. You know, with no, my friends were telling my opponent, Romeo, don't run, Linda's gonna beat you. So, Raza Unida gives you the framework to be very confident about what you want and how to go for it, and just, go on, he said, just don't get in my way attitude. And I think I have taken that attitude and integrated it into my business, because I have 3 children and I didn't have any relatives in Austin, so I decided I have to figure out what to do. I had a degree, but I feel like Austin is, a very well-educated community. So in my ignorance, I got my real estate license thinking that I was gonna have more free time, which is the opposite. But, I integrated my children and trained them how to help me be in the business and work it, and I did very well. And I've done this for 30 years, and I've done almost every type of transaction, and there was a period where I did a lot of commercial transactions. And I think having the attitude of not having fear and saying you can do it because you've done a lot of other things that were supposed to be difficult makes you just do it. And people would tell me, isn't it hard for you, Linda? And I said, no, it's just paperwork. So I think the experience gives you the confidence to tackle things that are supposed to be perceived as difficult. And I did everything in real estate, translate contracts, took first-time home buyers back in '92 when it wasn't even heard of. But I think, and also getting an immigration attorney to help someone that had a visa that needed help, but he had all the qualifications to buy a house. So I think you integrate that attitude of can do, you don't take no for an answer, and that helps you accomplish what is perceived as difficult. And I think being involved in every aspect of Raza Unida, sustaining the infrastructure of the party, doing grassroots organizing, learning to interact with people to get things done, to me is an invaluable experience that helps you have the framework on how to analyze society, how to solve things, and how you can adopt to make it yours. And that's what we're about. We're trying to give people the opportunity for them to have the vision that they can do something. You put a mirror to them. Because a lot of times in my experience in real estate, people were very scared to buy houses. Oh, no puedo comprar casa. Pero ¿cómo no? Tiene todas las cualificaciones, tiene el sueldo, buen crédito, vamos a hacerle cáliz. Le said, okay. No es muy duro. I said, no. You just take, you just say, let's just try, let's just move forward. And that is what Raza Unida, I think, gives people like, we can do it, we've got what it takes. Okay. So we just say, adelante, Raza.
Great.
So that has been me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, Irma?
I need to go.
Yeah.
Okay. The name, ¿verdad?
What? Go ahead.
I'm Irma Mireles, and I first met Jose Angel, and then I met Mario, and this was in the 60s. I met them where I worked, so I really didn't talk to them that much. I just knew that they were there. And I vaguely remember, I also met Nacho Perez at that time. And I think it was Nacho who tried to talk to me a little bit about it. And then I remember Jose Angel also tried to talk to me. They were talking to me about Mayo, because I was about 19 or 20. But I really couldn't talk, because like I said, I was at work. And it was a social service agency. Anyway, eventually, I ended up going to a rally. And that's when I started really getting involved. And that rally was for 4 people who were running for city council. Rosie was running for city council, Mario, Bill Benavides, and Gloria Cabrera. And then I started getting involved. Rosie and I became real good friends. By getting involved, I started listening to what Jose Angel was saying, and also Mario. And at the time, there was a temporary county chair for Raza Unida. Raza Unida was not quite formed yet, but it was Joe Castillo. Mm-hmm. And I will never forget, this is a story I always tell, that they had classes, and this was after work, because I worked full-time at the phone company. And I remember that Joe had a map, and on it, it was colored, and he says, you see the green? And of course we saw the green, and the top, that was the north side, there was a lot of green. And on the west side and the south side, and barely nothing of green on the east side, and that's mostly where the blacks lived. And the west side, there were just little specks here and there, the same with the south side. And then he asked us, you know what that is? And of course we didn't know what the green was. He asked us what the green was. He says, those are parks. You see where the majority of the parks are? And of course they were on north side San Antonio. And then he asked, you know, the children in that area all go to those parks. And of course Brackenridge Park was there, and other parks. And says, but look at the east side, the south side, and the west side. And he concentrated mainly on the west side. He says, so where do our children go? Easy, they go to the street, and they play in the street. And of course that leads to other things, you know, breaking windows, getting into fights, all that stuff. So that, you know, that Linda talks about being like a sponge, that's how I felt, listening to all this. But as time went along, then it came time to get Raza Unida on the ballot. And we did that. And I remember we would go to houses, And if it was like early afternoon, the women would tell us, oh no, eso es para hombres. Yo no me meto en eso. Si quiere, venga más tarde, después de las 6 o después de las 5. And then the other part was getting a thick skin because they would slam the door on your face. And, but you know, eventually you just continue. And I remember this one time that there was a big function at Mission County Parks outside San Antonio, and they asked if anybody wanted to go out there and collect signatures. And Manuel Garza said he would go. I said, well, yeah, I'll go too. And eventually, there were 3 of us, Miguel, Berry, Manuel, and I. And Miguel Berry is the man I eventually married. But we went out there, and then when we were out there, there were anywhere from 3 to 7,000 people, maybe more. And they asked, okay, now's the time, the band's taking a break, you can go up and ask people whatever you need. And we discussed it, and I ended up doing the talking. I had never addressed a group, much less a group that size. I did it, and it worked out fine. I almost passed out after I left the stage. but you know, we did it. We set up, we already had our table ready, and people just came. And we got, I can't tell you, exactly, but I know it was in the thousands signatures. Some were people that just wanted to sign, and they weren't necessarily registered voters, but the majority were registered voters. So that's one of the things we did to help get Raza Unida on the ballot. And as time went on, we did, then came election, and Rosie became the county chair for Bexar County. And the next year, I became the county chair. And the following year, Manuel Garza became county chair. But I learned with the help of Rosie, because Rosie, she's one of my heroes. And Rosie, really knew the election code. Many of us learned the election code. That was our Bible. And we went to a lot of training in Austin, but also in Bexar County. And one of those times, well, it wasn't one, it was a few times that we met with the county, ¿qué era el?
Secretary of State? Or
No, here.
County chair?
No,
Jimmy Knight?
Jimmy Knight. Big, heavy. I just remember what he looked like, a big, heavy gringo that would sit back, como si fuera rey. And Rosie would, he thought himself.
Yes.
And Rosie, all these people, because this was for all the precinct chairs, and we were all sitting there, and everybody listening, and this was mainly white people, and a few blacks, and a few of us. But guess who was the only person that would question whatever he was saying? Rosie would question, and she asked very specific questions, and she was good. It came to the point that he enjoyed being questioned by Rosie. And,
Well, they could have prosecuted us for not using the funding right, so I didn't want to go to jail.
But I learned a lot from those sessions, and just doing every day. And yes, we the women, and one of the things that I've for long said that we would finally do a book that would be called The Footnotes, as Rosie said. We were the footnotes. But we learned a lot, and I learned enough so that I ran for San Antonio River Authority in '76. I read a little article. One of the things we learned in Raza Unida that there were many positions that were either appointed or got elected, or you were elected, but they were, kind of hidden. And being a commissioner of the San Antonio River Authority was one of them. And in November of '76, I read a little article that talked about the election for River Authority will be in January. So, and it had a deadline if you wanted to be, to apply to be a candidate. And I don't remember the deadline. I do remember that either $100 or 100 signatures. And of course, I chose signatures. And I got more than 100 signatures, again, because we had to make sure that people were actually registered to vote. And I collected, with the help of friends, 100 signatures, over 100 signatures. And so I turned them in, and another friend who has been sick, so he's not here, Ramon Vasquez y Sanchez, who's also an artist, worked at the county. And when they did the count of those signatures, he would call me and tell me, okay, they've approved 20 or 50, whatever. And every time that they announced they had approved, he would call and tell me, because there were no cell phones and no emails. But anyway, so I got my signatures. The election happened, and of course it happened in an off year, in January. And it was January 1977. I spent Thanksgiving and Christmas going to parties like I've never gone to parties during that period. Wow. And all I had were like business-sized cards that I would, pass out. And I remember being questioned one time by a man saying, well, what qualifies you? And I told him a certain degree of common sense. and that did it, he said, oh, I'm gonna vote for you. Yeah. But anyway, so the election happens in January 1977. My big office was a bedroom, and my big desk was my ironing board. And several friends from throughout Texas came to help work that election day. And I remember that I went out and visited precincts and came back to the house, and around noon, the telephone went out. And no calls going out or coming in. So, I said, well, let's go. I'm gonna go back out. And one of the things that happened is that I went to the west side, and I went to the precinct to check on the voting and, give out my cards. And all of a sudden, somebody tells me, I think he wants to talk to you. And I wasn't paying attention, so who's he? And they just said, look across the street. And he was who would become Archbishop Flores. And so I went over there, and I spoke to him. And of course, he wished me luck and all that. But the surprise of all that is that he wanted to bless me. And people were watching, and I wasn't aware that people even saw me go over there, much less watching me. And so he blessed me. And I understand afterwards a lot of, word got around, and that I got a lot of votes out of that blessing. But, but the most important part of all this is that then I went to the South Side San Antonio, and I was giving again out my cards, and there's this older woman to me. I was 29. Both women are coming in, and almost one holding on to the other, which I have to do now. But I walked towards them to give them my card, and they told me that they didn't want anything. They were just there to vote for Irma Mireles. I didn't even introduce myself. On that day, I just said, the day que las mujeres decide for themselves, and especially our elderly, then that's, ya ganamos, regardless of whether I won or not. To me, we had won, because our elderly, could do that. And I said, let's go home. For me, the election has been won. And I need to tell you that I also debated the guy who was the incumbent, but I won because I speak Spanish, and it was in the Spanish TV station. And, you know, that helped me. The other thing that helped me is I was friends with Mateo Camargo, who was DJ on Casio R, the Spanish radio station. And a couple of times that I can remember, he had me come in and we would just have a conversation and the music and in between the music, and I would just talk about the election and the importance. So that helped me too. But so I beat the incumbent 2-1, and I spent a little less than $100. So that was then, and then. But you know, Raza Unida, like Juanita and Linda have said, gave us that you know, I can do it. Lo puedo hacer porque soy yo, and I believed in it. For years, even in school, I used to question my dad, why are people boarding up their houses around us? And finally, my dad explained to me, I would just hear, se van a los trabajos. I didn't understand qué eran los trabajos. Los trabajos, of course, you know, they were migrant workers. And I'd always questioned that kind of stuff. But I felt that there was a vehicle that was missing something. We got to do something. But I didn't know how to do it. Raza Unida gave me the answer. And so from then on, you know, I knew that I could do that. And not only did I do it here in San Antonio, I did it in Juneau, Alaska. In the 90s, I moved to Juneau. And in Juneau, I got involved in the community, first through the church, and then I did several things. But one of the more specific things that I did is I got notice that somebody called me that Alaska was doing the English only. And I went, I was already a member of the State Advisory Committee on the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. And they helped me, and I got a lot of research done. And they kept having, calling meetings, calling hearings, and then they would get canceled. And one of those meetings, there was this man who turned out to be for English only. He was a lobbyist, but I found out that he was also a lobbyist for an Alaska Native organization. Anyway, I called and I sent a letter to the president of that organization, who was a woman. I really never heard back, except on the call. She did thank me for the call, and that was it. But then when the day came to the hearing, I usually had some people who would support me and go. This time I ended up going by myself. And I was there, and I read my little paper that I had as to why it shouldn't be English only. And of course, because Juneau and Alaska have a lot of tourism, and the tourism brought in a lot of money. So that's what I mainly talked about. At the beginning of that hearing, I was told that one of the members of the committee was missing but would be along soon, and he was Republican. I don't remember how I knew that, but he was Republican. Anyway, he comes in just as I'm finishing, and of course, again, I'm very nervous, and he comes in and he says, since I was just finishing, he says, "Young lady, you know what kind of, something like, you know what kind of day I've had? And I come in here and you call me a racist, I discriminate." And I said, "Sir, what can I tell you? If the shoe fits." And the room was about this size, and of course I'm facing them, but the room erupts. There were a lot of Alaska Natives behind me, and I didn't know that. But that's where the bill died. It never came out of committee. So I'm very proud of that. And I was going out.
You want to pass it on? You want to pass it on?
Yeah. And anyway, so as I was going out, I ran into that man who was a lobbyist for both, and he confronted me and scared me because he had been fired, and he blamed me. And while somebody went to get security, I walked away. I just stood up, as tall as I could, and I pushed back by just moving forward because, the one that was going to fall off those stairs was going to be him, not me. But yes, Raza Unida has given me the courage and experience to do a lot for the community, and I try to continue to do that, but it's Raza Unida.
And she's the co-chair of this committee, and she did probably 80% of the work.
My name is Lali Moeno, and I'm from the very southern tip of Texas, from the Rio Grande Valley, Del Valle. I'm from a little town called La Villa, between by Edcouch, Chelsea, between Harlingen and McAllen, between Harlingen and Edinburgh. It's closer. Okay. Anyway, I was very active at a very early age because of us being migrant farm workers. I got very familiar with the farm worker movement at a very early age, and I started learning a lot from it. As we grew older, I started to experience a lot of difficulties in the high schools. My family, my brothers, we all have experienced heavy discrimination. We were put in different schools, in migrant schools. We could not go to school with regular students. And I was thinking a while ago, one day I asked the student, "In what page are you guys in history?" And he showed me the page, and I said, "Wait a minute, we're in the same page too. How come we're in a different area? And if we cannot go with you there." But thanks to Mario Bledo, Mario filed a lawsuit against the state of Texas to do away with migrant schools. And so because of Mario, we were able to get back to regular schools. So I was in there, I got interviewed by Mario and some of the other people from St. Mary's who were working in this with Mario. Along the way, I graduated with a lot of issues. I graduated okay, but my counselor wanted me to go to Harlingen Vocational School. And I said, "No way, am I gonna go to vocational school? I wanted to be a scientist." And Albert Reda just told me that it was astronomer, that I wanted to be astronomer. And he was right, Albert is right, I wanted to be astronomer. But I was told no. So anyway, that made me upset again. But after that, we started developing Mayo. And I read about it in the newspapers, how they were getting into trouble, but I kept thinking, why are we getting in trouble when we're all just dealing with the issues that are affecting us? I didn't understand it. So I asked my dad, and my dad would explain it to me a little bit, but he said, "You can't go because you're a girl." Dad, remember you told me that I was the only one who could speak English in the house? He said, "Yes." "Okay, I can help a lot." And he said, "Well, no." Well, a las escondidas, I went ahead and got heavily involved with Mayo. And then along the way, I met Jose Angel as we organized the Edcouch Chelsea walkout. And that was a humongous problem for me because I was the one at the top with all the students. And like Cesar Chavez told us in one meeting one time, he said, "You guys, if you organize people, think about what you want to do with them before you get them to this level." The hardest thing in an organization is to maintain that power. And Cesar was right. Okay, we had no goals and no plans. We had 200 and something students out of the high school, and if it wasn't for Amancio Chapa from La Joya and somebody, Luis Diaz de Leon, we remember the name.
Yeah.
Remember Luis Diaz?
Yeah.
Awesome man. He was from Laredo, no?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. He went to the valley, thank God, and he helped us out quite a bit. And he and Jose Angel, I don't know how they knew it at the top, because I was like a footnote like you guys. We were I considered myself under the radar. And I had to stay under the radar because we were girls, we were women, we were young girls. Our parents didn't want us out there. My parents were upset because, not my dad, but my mom was upset because her family was upset because I was attending Penn American. And they were saying, all she's gonna do is run around with men. And I said, I wish, but that's not why I want to go. I mean, I wish I could do that, but no, I want to study, Mother, I want to do something. I want to make some money so I don't sleep on the floor anymore, So anyway, I got educated. My second year to Pan Am, I went into Jacinto Treviño. But during the walkout is when we met Jose Angel and everybody. And it was Jose Angel who told us, this is right a little bit under Raza Unida. He told us, you have to organize Mayo chapters in other cities because we need that organization because we're working on a third party. And that's about it, okay. So I had to get Mayos from Harlingen, from La Feria, from Santa Rosa, all those little towns. I had to get representation in Mayos. And so we did. But I didn't know what Angel was up to until later. He knew. And Luz, they knew what they were doing. But anyway, I did that part. We organized more Mayos. So as we had our Mayo convention at La Lomita, I know some of you went to La Lomitas, I saw this morning. That was the eye-opener for us. And Luz, I attended her seminar. I couldn't believe what she was telling us to do. I said, we needed somebody like the ladies here are all saying, the women here, that we needed Raza Unida, that we needed Mayo, we needed Jose Angel, we needed Mario, we needed everybody, all our mentors. Because the time was right. We had already been humiliated enough, all of us. And so the time was right for us to meet all these people, and Rosie and everybody. Okay, so we were right. So from there, from La Lomita, we refused to leave the building. I don't know if you guys remember. The Oblate Fathers, where Alberto Vera is in here somewhere. The Oblate Fathers and nuns got very upset at us because Alberto's group and some other people from Laredo, from somewhere else, other Mayos, painted the Virgen Maria brown because the statue of the Virgen Maria was white, and we said, how can we have a white woman, a white virgin, and anyway, they were, Alberto just told me that they were the ones who did it. So the next morning, the priests came, and they were irate. We needed the seminarians, and everybody came, the monjas, to kick us out, and we said, no, we're not leaving. And so we didn't leave, we stayed there, And the conference ended, and we had wonderful instruction at the conference. The conference ended, and we had talked about having our separate schools, hiring our Latino instructors and teachers and professionals, and we had talked about the third party. And so I decided to go with Colegio Jacinto Treviño, but never gave up Mayo. I never gave them up. So at Jacinto Treviño, one of my jobs was to recruit the students. So guess what I did? I recruited Mayos only to come to Colegio Jacinto Treviño. And if they weren't Mayo, we would make a Mayo right there. And we had to attend the seminars, and we're the ones who did Raza Unida. It was Mayo who did Raza Unida at Hidalgo County in South Texas. And then from there, because I was really kind of responsible too for the registrations that we were doing to get the party on the ballot. So I did more or less what Irma did. I had to go over there to the office with all these gringos and gabachas there. And I had to sit there by myself shaking like that, and they were checking the registrations. Y los aventaban, not this one, not this one, not this one, not this one. I said, wait a minute, they are American citizens, I know them, you know. And so what I did was, can I have them? Yes, you can have them. So one of the things that I did personally was go back to those houses and get another one. And I made sure that the corrections were there. You know, there wasn't anything wrong with it. It's just, they just didn't put a period or something. But like, you know, like the Republicans are doing right now, how they're trying not, getting people of color not to vote. They were doing it since that time, guys, okay? And so we didn't let them. We got the party on the ballot for Jose Angel among all of us. Okay, so that's how I got involved. And I just went, Jose Angel sent us to Carrizo, I think, to Carrizo Springs. I had no idea where Carrizo Springs was, so I was from a little bitty town in La Villa. But Angel drew something, here you go on 281, y que sé que el highway, you know. Quién sabe que él nos dio un mapa, you know. So I didn't know, I just showed that thing and I followed it, you know. We took carloads of people to go register people over there. And we got the part in the ballot. I didn't do what Irma and some of the women here did at a higher level because I was in the lower level, registering people, checking those things. The only thing I did do was help Alma Canales because Alma was our lieutenant governor.
Right.
Running for lieutenant governor, the first one. And she was my buddy from college, from Pan Am. And so we were also doing the newspaper called the Yamero for the Texas farm workers. We did that newspaper, both of us together. And so under David Fischel from the United Farm Workers. And so, you know, that's why I went to help Alma. But I didn't help anybody else. I did distribute the stickers. I have stickers in my house. I didn't want to bring them because I said, si lo miran, me lo van a quitar. Like I'm gonna have, I have them in my office, you know. So my job was to distribute stickers and put on cars and talk to people and tell people about Ramsey, tell people about Alma, and all kinds of people who were running. That was my job. But I never did go higher, and I couldn't do that. I had to hide from a culture who didn't want women out there. So I stayed under the radar until the Monitor found me one day, the newspaper from McAllen. They found me, and not long ago, they did an entire page on me in the McAllen newspaper, and that made me really upset because they really took out a lot of personal information. Nobody had done it. I said, why are you doing it for 30 years later? And they said, people have to know what you did. Why? They already know. My neighbors know what I did. And then he said, no, everybody has to know. I said, that's not right. You know, this is confidential between me and La Raza. I didn't want the whites to know. It's just among us. Okay. So anyway, that kind of upset me. So I was under the radar, okay, and then working with Chuy Ramirez and all the Mayos. So thank you all. It's been an honor for me to be here with Rosie and Irma and Linda and Juanita and my
Miss Luz. Yes.
Gutierrez.
Thanks. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here with these women, and they're my friends, you know, have always been my friends. But I got involved, I come from a real conservative upbringing, and a very, I was never poor, I have to tell you. My father was a dairy farmer in Duval County, and he actually ran for office in Duval against PAR. And so I had exposed, but we were little, you know, and you know, we just knew he was doing something over there in El Rancho, but you know, we didn't. So I was involved in politics on the periphery, and politics were big there in Falpurres. I'm from Falpurres. But then when I went to college, but we were real innocent, ¿verdad, Linda? I love that word innocent, because we were, you know, innocent.
Yeah.
High school, we're thinking about the prom or getting cleaned up or whatever, you know, all the boyfriends we had. But when I went to college, my life changed. basically because you start learning. When you live in a town and you're not poor, you sort of fit in, with everybody else around there because of your class, basically. And so, I didn't feel there was any discrimination. We had one black in our school, and half of us were Mexicanos, Mexican American. But when I went to college, then you get exposure, to other people, you get to exposure with things. That's why the more educated you are, the more dangerous you become. And so I went to college and started taking classes, and Charlie Cottrell is here. He had a lot of influence on his political science classes. Why would I take a political science? I wanted to be a teacher. Why would I take political science? But I did, and in that process, I met Jose Angel Gutierrez, at the Friday night dances. And he liked the way I dance, so that's how we met. But, so we were there, we also marched anti-war movement, we were involved in the streets and stuff like that. And so I had two brothers in Vietnam at the time. But, so my mom was confused, what are you doing? Your brothers are fighting for this country, it's our country. So it was, things happen to you, you change. But that's how I got involved in politics, mainly because of our involvement. And we were young Democrats. Jose Angel doesn't want to remember that time, but we were young Democrats. We were out there organizing. We used to go to Austin, which was a podunk little town at the time, to state meetings, the Democratic Party. So that's sort of how I got involved in this whole politics. And then, of course, I ended up marrying Jose Angel, and we moved to San Antonio. Again, Charlie Cottrell was our padrino. He was the best man at our wedding. Right, Charlie? He's right there. He was the best man at our wedding because Charlie had a lot of impact on Jose Angel, and Jose Angel had a big impact on Charlie. And of course, I had a big impact on me. But I ended up going to San Antonio when we got married, and I taught at Lackland Air Force Base, where half of the kids are from the projects and half of them were the military. So I called my mom to tell her, hey Mom, I'm teaching, I'm finally teaching. And I'm teaching kids from the project, and she said, is that a town or something close by, We had never heard of the projects, okay, in Falfurrias, never heard of the project. So, but that was an eye-opening experience for me as far as poverty and seeing these poor kids. They're in the same class, and yet the gringos were more educated, they were traveled, and even the Mexicanos that were elected had traveled, so they had more exposure. So it was a really eye-opener for me, being a teacher and learning about the inequities, which I had already learned in college, right? But then seeing it. And then we lived on the west side too. And so we lived, Jose Angel's tia lived in the west side, and she had a little casita con gallinas and everything else. And when she passed away, when we were just getting started, she gave us the house, well, she gave Jose Angel the house, and with that house, we were able to buy another house, which was our first. So that's how I got involved, because there, Jose Angel got involved, and all the guys that you already know the story about Mayo, they used to come to the house and have meetings, and Padlan's wife and I became real good friends. I can't even remember her name at this moment.
Jane.
What is it?
Jane.
No, not Jane. Elena Padlan. So we'd go, and the guys would go, and they'd spend their time talking in politics and everything, but they didn't include us, we were sort of ignored, for lack of a better word. And so, but as time went by, we got more informed, and of course, the things were going on, and we continued. That's when the beginning of the Raza Unida party, and Jose was going to college. We were poor. I never was poor until I married Jose Angel. But anyway, it was, and then the decision was to do the experiment in Crystal City, and that's how we ended up in Crystal City. Pregnant and another kid and two kids. And the women really were the strength of the Raza Unida party. The women were the strength. Because as we were organizing, the men would always have their meetings and drinking and having meetings y la fregada. And so we'd be over here cooking and complaining, pura tomadera, and all this. Of course, he was organizing, right? He was organizing. But at the same time, they needed us. So we formed Ciudadanos Unidos, the same things everybody else here did. You had to have an organization where you could organize and work with the people. So they started meeting on Sunday, every Sunday, very organized. I mean, there were about 50 guys at these meetings, but we couldn't go. They didn't want us there. It was just the men going to these meetings. And then all of a sudden, I'll never forget, I forgot her name, Trevino, she's already passed away. One of the Trevino family was very involved with us. And we were, and she was, and we were talking, and we used to cook, tamales, menudo, whatever they wanted, we had it there for the guys, cooking and everything else. But then when we tried to go in, he ended up becoming Sheriff Serna. Mr. Serna said, no, we don't want the women here. And so they took a vote that they didn't want us, okay? So we said, well, forget this, no tamales, no menudo, no comida. We're done. Okay? So when they took another vote, they had to realize that they gotta let us in, or guess what, they're in trouble. So they did, basically, and Mr. Serna, who by the way ran for Raza Unida as the sheriff and won, he walked out. So we had about 5 or 6 of the guys that walked out of the meeting. They didn't want to have anything to, because ahí estaban a estar las viejas, So it was a great time, and it influenced me a lot when that happened. When I said, man, these women are tough, they want to take some action. And so we met at Trevino's house all the time to talk about the next step in this movement that we had. And then related to that also, again, the politics and getting women involved. When we were able to get the clinic, it was all politics we were talking about. Remember, Nixon was president at the time, and he saw what was going on, and he took it. He said, "This is an opportunity for them," and we said, "Well, this is an opportunity." So we were able to set up the clinic, and I was the director of the clinic, and they celebrated 50-year anniversary a year ago. The Community Health Center, Centro de Salud in Yakima. And that was fabulous, because what we did, and thanks to Viviana Santiago, I mention women because Viviana helped Jose Angel a lot, and really Viviana was his right-hand person, for anything. And she wrote a proposal together with Jose Angel about bringing the clinic to the poorest section of Crystal City, where there was no water. Can you believe no water, no sewer? And that whole neighborhood was just poor. And so thanks to that grant, we were able to get another grant for the sewer, the water, and being able to provide all these services for the people, and also child care centers. So the women really are the lifeline to getting to the family, because if you don't have the women involved, who's gonna take care of the kids? Who's gonna be doing the cooking? So that was the experiment that we had, and really it was very successful. So we have a clinic in Crystal City, and a lot of clinics all over the place, what we call community health centers, and most of them, and then we're supposed to have a program today where we had some of the Mujeres, the outreach workers, that Ofelia, Beatriz Mata, Lupe Mata, I mean, I know them because they're my friends. And, they were given the opportunity to get a job. And opportunity to me is a really important word. And they said, they wanted to have a job, but there were not a lot of jobs there, So thanks to the clinic, we were able to set up an outreach program. And all these women, there were 6 of them, got involved. And they weren't educated, but they were trained. They were trained to go out there and work in the community, find out what the medical needs were. What they're doing right now, but it wasn't being done at the time. And they became the leaders in the community, basically. They became the leaders because they were the ones that were talking to the people and so on. So the rest is history. You've already read about it, I'm sure. But the more important thing I want to talk about, Rosie, I remember when we were forming the Raza Unida, and we go to these meetings, and I'm not a shy person, as you can tell, but I'm also in awe sometimes of people. And we went to, and what's it, Henry B. Gonzalez was speaking, was it at St. Mary's?
St. Mary.
At St. Mary's University. And we went there, we were raising hell, because we didn't like Henry B. Nada más le hacía los mandados a los gringos, you know, so we didn't like him. So what ended up, so we're going there to give him hell, and we were harassing him and everything else. But then this woman stands up, this young girl, we were young. And she says, Henry B., and she's screaming at him, and she's pointing with her finger like this to Henry B., telling him he's an SOB and blah, 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 blah. And I mean, I was raised very Catholic, very conservative, everything. I said, oh my God, she's pointing, that's really rude. I thought, you know what, that's so rude. But when she got through with that, let me say, the crowd went wild. The crowd went wild. So Rosie is someone that I've always looked up to because she was young. She was young, and she's there screaming her head off at this guy who's a congressman, So that's my story.
Thanks, Liz. It's interesting that my son Joaquin, who is a congressman, has Henry B's seat. So I was the county chair, and Irma talked. Irma,
No, just do it like this.
Just put it closer.
okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right. I was the county chair for Bexar County, and Irma talked about a lot of the stuff we did. I think one of the things that I found out very early on, though, is you couldn't really do anything alone. You really had to have a good team. And I was lucky that Irma was there. There was Ciro Rodriguez was on that at that time. We had Choco Mesa and Danny Mesa that were training people. We broke down the kinds of different jobs, and people did those. And all of us had to do the going door to door, picking up signatures, being told that you have to wait till my husband comes. And in many cases, also in my case, I know for sure, possibly in some of yours, my family thought I was crazy.
Yep.
Latina women, Mexican women don't do that.
That's right.
You don't go and register people to vote. You don't go and sit with the guys and decide strategy or any of that. And so there was a price to pay for being out there. And so I can understand why you wanted to be undercover there. But it was very difficult because at that time, unlike today, at that time, we were considered a radical and a militant party just for trying to get our rights, just for fighting the discrimination, just for being uppity Mexicans that refused to be second-class citizens. And so I think, it's interesting today when you look at the groups that are, particularly in Texas, I see all these young people, and I get a lot of charge out of that, a lot of hope out of that, because I remember us. And I see these kids that are learning things like we did. We didn't know election code books. We didn't know the rules. I only knew as a county chair that if we messed up, I'd be in jail for the way the money was spent. And I knew that none of us wanted to be in jail for that. People were looking for excuses to put us in jail. One of the things that I always remember about that period of time, too, that nobody really touched on, was that it was a time of danger, too. I would get phone calls at 2 in the morning, and they'd slam the phone and then call back again. I mean, trying to get you not to sleep, right? I would get those letters with the cutout magazines like you see on the ID channel. It's like stupid things like that, but it was scary sometimes. But I knew that I'd be damned if I was going to ever allow my children that were not yet born to have to put up with that kind of fear. My mother had to put up with it as a maid, and I'd be damned if I was going to put up with that kind of fear. And so I think all of us experience that in one way or another. And as I look at today, I find it real interesting because people ask sometimes, okay, what was similar then to what is now? One of the things that fascinates me is that you heard several voices. Organizing was happening throughout the state of Texas. In these little pueblos, in the bigger cities, and yet today, it's almost as all of that died down. Somehow we lost it. And it's great to see the young people trying to resurrect, not exactly what we did, but resurrect that concern for the community, resurrect that pride in being Latino, being Mexicano, being Chicano, being Latinx, resurrect everything that we tried to build. And to me, that's really what I hope is our legacy, is one of our legacies. I'd like to switch a little bit over to the legacy. And I don't know, can somebody tell me how much time we have?
40 minutes.
How much?
40.
40, okay.
We still
I
have
see
somebody
the
else.
legacy very much in my children. Because when they decided to run, they had their own groups of people that they talked with. But I also had, because I'd been active in Raza Unida, even though people put us down at that time, 20 years later, the Express News was writing about how important it had been to have the Raza Unida party, how it's pushed the Latino, the Mexican-American agenda, the Chicano agenda at that time, and how if it had not been around, we would not have seen the amount of elected officials that we were beginning to see in the Chicano movement. Had it not been for that push for registration, had it not been to talking to women and saying, you don't have to wait for your husband, had it not been for seeing the Alma Canaleses and for seeing all these other women that ran as county chairs, that ran for office, had it not been for that, we wouldn't have the kinds of gains that we were making at the time. Granted, we still need a lot to do. And my son Joaquin, he's taken one area, which is the way we're portrayed still by the media and by the publishing industries, and all of that, in which he talks about how we are made invisible to the greater community, to the larger US, because we're still lacking in those people that can tell our story. So what we do here today is very important, and I know for those of you that are filming, it's very important that all of our stories be heard and that people understand who we are, because I don't think that today they still know who we are.
That's right.
I think that as we look at what was important too, I like to tell a story of a guy who used to direct SER. Y'all remember Project SER?
Yeah.
I was in a bar one time, and lots of times, but
There's
this
a lot
one
of
time, yeah, there's a lot of stories. We won't talk about that. But I was in this bar, and this guy comes up to me, he's the head of SER, and he says, hey, Rosie, thanks a lot. I said, for what? He says, well, today we talked with the governor. He just gave SER another $1 million because of Raza Unida, because they were so scared that we would be taking votes away from Doc Briscoe and all of these people, that they were giving resources for the first time to some of these groups.
The controlled groups.
Huh?
The controlled groups.
Yeah, well, but still, the fact that we were around then benefited some groups, which ultimately benefited some finding jobs for people and that kind of stuff. But I think that what we did, loose with the clinic, everywhere you went where there was Raza Unida, there were all sorts of gains. There were all sorts of changes. We moved the needle forward. Like I said, we elected a lot more candidates, even though they were not Raza Unida candidates always, but later there were many more. Yes, a lot more Chicanos that were elected. And I think a lot of other gains.
And women too, that we elected, because.
That was the thing. Women, I mean, I can remember being told that was not our place.
Yep.
Well, it's our seat now, it's our place, and we're beginning to see a great many more women that are being elected and that are running things. When you look right now at what's happening with the Valley, specifically with the Valley, you can see that it's a shame that we let it go. I mean, it's a shame that, well, maybe we ought to look at the other side of that coin. It's a good thing that we're around because I think people do want to learn. How did you organize? What was important? Like Lou said, it was adding the women to the equation that made a difference. There's a lot to learn from that time. And I know many of the younger people often ask, what did you do? How did you do it? And one of the things I always say, you know, you guys have a lot more resources than we had.
I know.
You have a phone, you have a fax, you have a media
You have
that'll
Facebook?
you have Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, all of these ways to communicate that we didn't have. We had to go knock on those doors. We had to talk to individuals one-on-one. And maybe in some ways, that's actually a better thing.
Yeah, it is.
But at any rate, let's look at what did we accomplish. And why don't we this time start with Luz?
Well, we just remembered we have another presentation. So you
Okay.
we don't have 40 minutes.
Okay, we don't have 40 minutes. Okay. Where's the other presentation? What time?
She's right there.
Samantha, she's a writer.
Oh, good, okay.
So-
So are you presenting now or later?
Why don't we finish our session and then?
Okay.
Make it short.
And then it could be a conversation,
Oh, okay, all right.
if that's okay.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
okay.
sure.
Go ahead.
Right here? Okay.
Okay,
Great.
yeah. She wants to do a conversation.
Here, you wanna give that to, oh, she's got a microphone.
I gotta take my.
Well,
Ándale, you take care of yours.
So, anyway, going forward. As Rosie Castro pointed out, you know, these are a lot of the footnoted mujeres, right? But a lot of scholarship these days are re-examining it and getting a deeper dive into it. A lot of them were contributors to the Chicana Movidas book that Maria Cotera helped to edit. And also other scholars, Tiffany Gonzalez is also focused on them. So I want to jump a little bit into that. One is the formation of Raza Unida party. So one of the things I really want to point out is a story that kind of encapsulates kind of these early interventions into the party. And just to note really quickly, you know, the Raza Unida party came out of a big organizational movement. I mean, they already had a huge base because of all the work they did through Mayo, right? And all the community work they did in general. So when they had the Winter Garden project, I mean, all that work that they put in South Texas really inspired other places to have chapters and to make it a bona fide or a robust state chapter, right? And so a lot of the people that were part of that have been mentioned already, so I don't want to repeat that information, but I do want to jump into some of the early interventions. So with that, one of the stories I want to start with is Maria Elena Martinez. So she was running in the party, right, in 76. She ran against Daniel Bustamante for the state chair position. It was not the first time she ran. She ran against Alberto Loera in 74, but didn't win. But her motivation to run went back to 73. And in that particular story, Maria Elena Martinez, she was saying, and why are we not running for chair? Why can't women run for chair? We work for the party and we've organized the party. I don't understand why we have to automatically assume that we could only be vice chairs. So she did run against Daniel Bustamante and win, and Linda Del Toro actually played a major role in her winning. She said, I didn't really care what they thought. I won her. I'm going to do what it takes to get her elected. To me, it was not like getting in my way. I just didn't worry about it. I said, this is what we need to do, this is what we want, and this is what we're going to do about it. Period. Are you with us? We were victorious. She got elected, and I got elected in the executive committee. I think it showed that if you do the work, you're going to reap some of the reward. She deserved to be in a leadership position, and she got it. We got her elected, we got on the floor, and we politicked for her. And so that just speaks once again to the women's work in the organization. So once again, the Winter Garden Project really did several things. One, to inspire places like Houston, Austin, San Antonio, beyond South Texas, to really be involved in the Raza Unida party. But additionally, what had been in place before then was a good government league, which not only had control of San Antonio politics, but other politics throughout Texas. This was a very strong hold onto this conservative, white supremacist, organization that maintained power. And Raza Unida did a lot to put a dent into that, to crack that power structure. So with that being said, I'd also like to say that, speaking to Luz Bazan Gutierrez, her point about when the men aren't going to get fed until they let women be involved. That was like super inspiring when I learned about this. But additionally, within a matter of months of them doing that strike, Gutierrez became the Zavala County chairwoman. So it did work. It did have automatic results. Additionally, you had early on through and I have a picture here to reflect that, the Committee for Barrio Betterment, Rosie Castro. She was involved with, seeing women like the wives of Joe Bernal, Pete Torres, Albert Peña, and she saw all of them, and she was like, well, why aren't women more involved? That really inspired her, because they already saw all the work they did behind the scenes, but weren't necessarily being recognized for that. So, because of all of these women, including Luz Bazan Gutierrez, Rosie Castro, Ivy Chapa, Marta Cotera, Irma Mireles, Maria Jimenez, another mujer here, Inés Hernandez Avila, all the work they did, they made the party one that would very much be inclusive of women and represent women. Keep in mind, at this time, women comprised 15% of the candidates, 36% of the county chairwomen, and 26% of chairwomen, period. So, Ivy Chapa also played a role in putting the party platform on women together, and this is it. When the platform came out, it was very reflective of the Equal Rights Amendment at the time. But it wasn't just talking about that. They also talked about other things. They said all resolutions referring to equal rights or group representation, including the Raza Unida Party platform, to women, whether they be working mothers, career women, or housewives. In other words, all women, period. All women should be respected and considered to be a core part of the party. Secondly, and the participation of the women to include decision-making positions of the Raza Unida Party be actively continued through political education and recruitment of women. A lot of women took that to heart and made that possible. And how they made that possible was really through a number of different things I'm about to get into, but one thing I want to note is that the women's liberation movement, as much as they were open to women, weren't necessarily supportive of Raza Unida women.
No, never.
So through the Texas Women's, the Texas Women's Organization, right? Yeah, Political Caucus, exactly, and the National Women's Political Caucus. You had Raza Unida women initially involved in that, one of which, during the time, they were really supporting Ama Canales, but Sissy Farenthold and others did not really support them. Even though they said they were for women, they weren't really supporting them. So because of that, they eject themselves from their, and even though people such as Marta Cotera would remain involved in those organizations, they would always have to confront this attitude in the women's movement of, oh, we know better, we're trying to help you out because you're less than us, right? They had that paternalistic attitude towards a lot of these women. And so they had to confront that too on the other sidelines, just as a side note. So one of the things also I'd like to note is that I feel like for a lot of these women in the Raza Unida Party, and it being very much concentrated in Texas politics, the person earlier in this session was talking about Gus Garcia and all those other people. The Hernandez versus Texas case keeps us reminded this is a Juan Crow segregated South. This is a context in which they were galvanizing people to vote, galvanizing people to be a part of the party, and you can't really detach from that, because if you do, then you don't understand why a lot of these mujeres were both for racial equality and women's rights. They would never divorce the two. The two were integral to one another because of their experiences growing up and seeing all that racism up front. So with that being said, the organization, they were mainly involved, there was a caucus within the party, and that was the Mujeres de Raza.
And they want us out here by car.
And this is one of the major conferences they had in '73 and some of the workshops that they did have. And it's basically what was already explained through Luz Gutierrez, I can do it, right? That can do, or like Irma Morales said, that can do attitude. So when they had this first conference, they brought a lot of women together. It was like 20 different counties represented, about over 200 women. And the main focus of a lot of these Mujeres por la Raza conferences was to not only strategize among women, teaching women, how do you get elected? How do you run as a candidate? A lot of that was a strategy-oriented stuff, but also dealing with some of the issues that were personal to them as women of color, as Mexican women, right? And so all of that was represented there. And I have to say, you know, I think it's really important to note that these spaces allow these women to flourish in the party. It allowed them to think critically about, well, how can I be represented on the slates? And as a side note, which I'll bring up and re-emphasize later, do you think the Democratic or Republican Party was doing this at this time?
No.
For any women? No. So Raza Unida Party was also at the forefront at this time of really having women not only shape the party, but also be key players in running in the party for positions.
Yeah, I agree.
And so just to Irma Morales' point earlier, she pointed out, this was no easy task. She said a lot of the women were registered to vote and were not registered to vote. And then they saw it as a men's thing. And you go to the door and they say, you come back later, talk to my husband, but I don't do anything regarding politics. And so it was changing that mindset of, no, we can't do it. We can run, and there's nothing wrong with that. Women can participate in the electoral process. And so they were at the forefront of making that happen. And they were building, you know, just as I built off their shoulders, they were building off the shoulders of these veteranas right here. Maria L. Hernandez and Virginia Musquiz.
Yeah.
And so these two women have been involved in Texas politics for a long time, a very long time. Primarily through FOSL, yes, and through other organizations. And so, you know, Maria L. Hernandez was, for many women, living proof that Chicanas have the freedom, the energy, and the capacity for political development within the Chicano community. For Virginia Musquiz, she also, you know, played a major role with the executive committee of the party, and she started an intense voter registration campaign that played, you know, proved to be very beneficial when the Winter Garden Project was going on. So these women played a major role, and even though they're playing a major role in kind of teaching the new generation, one thing I like to highlight is that it didn't just go one way. It also went the other way, which is to say that you often had younger and older women working within the party together and influencing one another. I remember when I interviewed you, Rosa Castro, and you had talked about how Irma Morales, you know, kind of influenced or inspired you just as much as she spoke about you, right? So it was those kind of conversations and that kind of cross-generational inspiration that was occurring at the time. And so with that being said, you know, Evie Chapa at the end of the 1973 conference said, the Chicanos who participated in the first Conferencia de Mujeres por la Raza demonstrated that the Chicano movement is stronger because mujeres are actually involved and further making decisions. We feel that these efforts of Mujeres por la Raza begin to fulfill our commitment to la mujer as an active participant and supporter of our own political expressions in the Raza Unida Party, and allowed us to develop our own philosophies as women within a minority group, as Chicanas. So with that being said, one of the other things I like to mention is, you know, and unfortunately she passed away already, Maria Jimenez. But, you know, she did a lot of work in Houston and she ran, and when she ran, it wasn't just a campaign that was targeting Chicanos. It was also a campaign working alongside the African American community in that place. Houston was a very different place where basically the only way that Black and brown people were going to get power was to work with one another. And they had already forged these kind of relationships in the student work that they had done. So with that being said, I will say that as the Partido is becoming a statewide organization, it goes from not only saying it's the only alternative for Chicano, but also saying that it is a important organization that African Americans should consider as well. And an example of this was, Amiri Baraka also went to Crystal City, scoped it out, saw what was happening. He was at the time a part of, the National Black Political Assembly. And so he was a part of a major political organization at the time. Him visiting Crystal City gave him the confidence that he should, in fact, and other African Americans should align themselves with the Raza Unida party. So at the time in which Maria ran, she ran basically off of this momentum she had built up as a student organizer, as someone involved in Mayo. And a lot of people, whoever I interviewed, very much respected Maria. Because she was very, strategic. She was people respected her for her intelligence, everything that she did. And when she did run, she was saying that she was reluctant. She didn't really want to run, but she felt that she needed to do it because she needed to change her community, right? And so she would walk around with African Americans in neighborhoods such as Fifth Ward and other neighborhoods. And she would say, this is the United People's Party, also known as the Raza Unida Party, right? And so it was like that conversation, and she felt it was really important because it was about the political consciousness. For her, Raza Unida Party, whether or not you ran, a big part of it was about educating others, gaining and growing that political consciousness. So she was, definitely working with a lot of people to do that, and once again, Ernesto Hernandez Avila and others supported that effort and made that a reality for her campaign when she ran for state representative for the 87th district. A number of the different things that she had on her agenda, just really quickly, was that, I'll be done soon. Sorry, this is Rian. I'll jump to this. She won only 17% of the vote. But for her, that didn't, yeah, that's pretty good. But I'm saying, some people are like, oh, okay, well, she didn't win. And she ran against Ben Reyes, right? Which was somebody who was already in the power structure. Yeah, right. So she didn't win against the other Chicano. But it was important because, once again, as they pointed out, without Raza Unida making these waves, they wouldn't have gotten the funding that more directly affected the community. It wasn't, for a lot of women who ran in their campaigns, it wasn't about winning, but it was also showing that women can run, right? They can run these campaigns, they can do it. And become people like Irma Morales that hold positions, right?
Scared of you?
So just to wrap up, some takeaways. Once again, what is the legacy of this? We're at a place now where I personally feel like the Democratic Republican Party, whatever, any party representing, they still don't really appeal to us, right? We still are having to make they think a Latino vote is maybe a Cuban vote. I'm not really sure exactly what's going on there, but the bottom line is that they're not really appealing to our communities in the way in which they need to. But I think that what the example of the Raza Unida Party brings us is that third parties do matter. Putting that external pressure does matter. And for women in particular, having an organization at the forefront that led women, women were the legwork and the backbone of it, so of course they would, but the thing is that having women at the forefront of that showed an example to both the Democratic and Republican Party of what women can do. Thank you.